Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Creation Myths. Today, I'm going to tell you a short story that started with me getting a new bath mat, and it's going to end with a very simple way to disprove young Earth creationism. So, I recently got a new bath mat for the bathroom where everybody in my family takes their showers. Now, as you can probably imagine, you have a bathroom, you've got a shower, the little rug that you have in your bathroom, it's constantly getting soaking wet from people getting in and out of the shower. And, if it's like a typical, rug, even though you try to dry it, maybe you hang it up to dry, you clean it regularly, eventually those little rugs get really gross. So when we decided we need to replace our bath mat, we went in a different direction. Instead of just a new rug, we went with what's called a bath stone, which is what it sounds like. It's a stone. It's made of a material called diatomaceous earth. Now, diatomaceous earth is awesome as a bath mat because it can absorb a ton of water and it dries really, really fast. That's not relevant to the rest of this video, but I just want to put this out there. Diatomaceous earth bath mats, absolute game changer. Now, relevant for this video, and the reason I'm talking about this is not just because I got this new bath mat. I'm talking about this because my favorite thing about this bath mat is how it disproves young Earth creationism. Now, before I go any further on this, I need to shout out friend of the channel, Dr. Joel Duff. As I was working on this video, I was doing my research, I was reading up on diatoms, and I found that he had written an article on this exact topic on his blog way back in 2015. So here's the article. I'm going to link that down below. You should definitely give that a read. It's not very long. The gist is the same as what I'm talking about here. I just think it's great that, he was way ahead of me on this one. It's all the information you need is right there. So let's step back and talk about what we're actually talking about here. So diatomaceous earth is a sedimentary rock that's made from the shells of organisms called diatoms. Here's what diatomaceous earth looks like under a microscope. So all of those little structures, those little basket-like things, those are the remains of the shells of these microbial organisms. That's all that's left after the rock forms. But when they're alive, diatoms look completely different. They look like this. This is a micrograph of actual diatoms as you would see them today. So what the heck are diatoms? These things are marine photosynthetic unicellular eukaryotes with silica shells. So the shells are like a glass-like material. Now when they die, they precipitate to the bottom, and the organic matter, the membranes and stuff, that stuff decays away, but the shells remain, and they're compacted into layers of sedimentary rock. Those rocks, those layers, can later be exposed through erosion and weathering, and that's your diatomaceous earth. And this stuff is harvested for all different purposes, and one of the more modern uses is to take chunks of it and use it as a bath mat. Now, the first and most obvious refutation of a young Earth that we can take away from this is that these processes take time and they require undisturbed deposition. And yet creationists want to attribute hundreds of millions of years of sedimentary layers to a single, catastrophic, turbulent worldwide flood. And that flood spanned just a single year. There's no way to lay down that many layers that quickly, especially during a catastrophic global flood. That kind of water movement, that turbulence, is going to interfere with the sedimentation. Think about it like this. If you have a jar, take a glass jar, fill it with a bunch of water, and then put a bunch of sand in it. Now, if you shake the jar and then just put the jar down and let it sit, the sand is going to fall to the bottom. If you pick the jar back up and shake it some more, the sand is going to be disturbed and it's going to mix into the water. Now, once the water settles, the sand will again fall to the bottom, but it won't settle while you're shaking the jar. Creationists want you to believe that there was a year-long global flood that literally rearranged the entire geography, the physical geography of the world. So the jar was shaking a lot, violently. And also, during that turbulent, violent worldwide flood that millions of years worth of sedimentation occurred in that single year. Yeah, that's not going to happen, right? That is obviously a silly claim to make. But there's an even bigger problem for a young Earth when it comes to diatoms. You see, diatoms are not equally distributed throughout the fossil record. We don't find them in the entire geological column. They only arrive on the scene about 180 million years ago. That's during the Jurassic period. And according to most creationist flood models, that's actually near the upper range of the flood layers. There are a few exceptions, looking at you, Institute for Creation Research, but most young Earth creationists and most young Earth creationist organizations will typically put the flood boundary, noting the end of the layers that were deposited during the flood year, at the KPG boundary, what was formerly known as the KT boundary, about 65 million years ago. But the flood layers go back well before the Jurassic, at least to the Cambrian over 500 million years ago. So you have diatoms being created during the Genesis creation week, according to young Earth creationists, but their fossilized shells are only found in the upper layers supposedly deposited during the global flood. You don't find them in what are supposedly pre-flood layers. You don't find them in most of the supposedly flood layers. You only find them in the uppermost part. Now, creationists have all sorts of silly ideas to explain away the clear order and progression that we see in the fossil record, right? Because it's not just diatoms that have this pattern that's incompatible with a global flood. You also see it with plants, with the progression from non-vascular to vascular, non-seed to seed, and then non-flowering to flowering. You, of course, see it with animals, with your progression from marine to terrestrial, with the development of the tetrapods, and then the appearance of the reptiles and the mammals and the birds, right? Creationists have to explain these patterns away, and they have all sorts of silly proposed mechanisms that purport to do it, but don't actually succeed. So like, for example, with the animals, they rely on the terrestrial animals moving to higher ground as the floodwaters are going to rise. Let's not even worry about that. Let's take that at face value. How is that supposed to work for marine microbes? Why do we have other shelled unicellular eukaryotes, like radiolarians, which, by the way, also have silica shells, and forams, which have calcium carbonate shells, and those go back to the Cambrian. But diatoms only appear starting in the Jurassic, a difference of hundreds of millions of years. Even if you accept as valid the creationist explanations, like so-called hydrologic sorting, that mechanism can't separate one group of silica-shelled marine microbes from another group of silica-shelled marine microbes. They're all going to be jumbled up together. Their size, their shape, their density, there's no mechanism to actually separate them from each other. So if a global flood is responsible for all of these sedimentary layers, all of those organisms have to be mixed up together. And since they aren't, that means there are actually millions and millions of years separating these layers. Those organisms actually did appear at different times in the history of the Earth, and that disproves young Earth creationism. And that, my friends, is how my new bathmat disproves a young Earth. Thank you for watching. Please remember to hit the like button before you go, leave a comment, subscribe, ask creationists how they explain diatoms. And as always, don't get fooled.